get it, hon. Thank you. I might want to stand back here. I don't know. Okay, no. Thank you. Tell them to pay you extra next week for moving furniture, okay? You know, sometimes the ego can get in the way. And we all know that. And there we go. During Desert Storm, 1991, there was a lieutenant colonel, guy just been promoted to lieutenant colonel. And this was his first combat field assignment. And he was feeling a little bit nervous about that. He didn't know if the troops would follow him and do what he says, and he wanted the word to kind of get out. And so he came into his office for the first time, sat down at his desk. That time a soldier appears. And what he thinks is, I really want to impress the soldier so that he will get the news out that I really know what I'm doing. So he picks up his phone, and he calls General Schwarzkopf. And he says, General Schwarzkopf, I appreciate you taking my call. I'm returning your call. What did you have to say, sir? He said, oh, thank you so much. You really did appreciate my advice. Well, Norm, anytime you want, please call me, and I'd be glad to share any thoughts I have, and I would like to know yours. But thank you so much for calling. And he hung up the phone. Looked at the soldier and said, Soldier, why are you here? He said, to install your phone, sir. Ego's funny, huh? What we're talking about and what I'm using as text is a book called 1 + 1 = 1. It was written by Reverend Howard Caesar, who is the minister at what used to be called the Pyramid, but Unity of Houston, in Houston, Texas. It has about 2,500, 3,000 members. It's one of the flagship churches, if you would, in Unity. And Howard shares in this book how we are on a journey and how we can complete that journey into oneness. And I want to use the first part of the book, the Journey to Oneness, as an example. Now, Howard himself was very fortunate, I think. He was brought up to go to occasionally a church that was pretty conservative, as he called it. And he said he was about 10 years old, and he listened to this message about fire and brimstone and salve and all that. And he said he went out on the front porch of the church, and he sat there. And he said, my daddy says God is love. This doesn't sound like love to me. I like God is love much better, so that's what I'm going to believe. And when he was 20 years old, he was invited to a Unity church for the first time. And 6 years later, he was ordained as a Unity minister. And Howard is just completing 40 years in Houston. Okay? But first he went to Olympia, Washington. And he went there he was called there, but he really loved the environment there. It was all about nature. The church in Olympia sits in a little park-like. And no houses around, just a nice little park, okay? With running trails and all kinds of things. Right? Kind of a cool setting. And he loved that because he was brought up in nature. He was brought up in Wisconsin. His father was a hunter and a fisherman, and his brother himself followed suit. So he always loved to be in nature. And he remembered that when his dad would sit down and rest while they were with nature, that it would seem like his dad was really at peace. And when his dad got sick, his dad requested of Howard that he walk him around a little orchard or the woods that were around their house. And his dad would actually go up to an oak tree and pat it. And then he would go to a maple tree and pat it. And so forth and so on. And so Howard always knew that being in nature was being one with God as far as he was concerned. And they went from 75 members to about 500 members in about a 5 or 6 year period. And that brought a lot of notice. And then Houston, which was a fairly large church at the time, well over 1,000 members, asked Howard to come there. Howard said, I really resisted that. I told Spirit, I want to stay here. He said, the more I'd say that, Spirit said, you got to go. And when he got to Houston, he said it was like a traumatic experience because he was used to walking around in the woods and all he had to walk around was concrete. And he said it actually took him 2 years to settle down. And settle down he did. And they have a great church there. They have a wonderful, wonderful church. And most of all, I think, it's been a lot because of Howard's leadership, but his ability to understand and teach that we are all one. One of the things in the introduction of this book was written by Michael Beckwith, Reverend Michael Beckwith, Dr. Beckwith, who is the senior minister, the founder of Agape in Los Angeles. And he is pretty well known internationally. And one of the things he shared in his foreword was that he had seen some work done by the World English Newsletter, and the study talked about what words in the English language were used most often. And the 23rd word, I think that's right, was the was the word one. The word one. And then he found out right after that was the word all. And he said that really caught his attention as a New Thought minister. That in all the words, the two words that were together was one and all. And so he said what he said and what he understood and what he felt the world was saying is that we are all from one source. And we are all one in Christ, in God. And as he started to understand that, he said that Howard, in his book, talks about oneness as a natural state of being. Now, what Howard points out, and I like the way he did it, was he talked about what we call the fall of humankind. Adam and Eve, if you would. Some people will take it literally, and that's okay, and some people take it metaphorically. Howard's metaphorical meaning is that the tree of life was really the tree from which, if you were to participate with it, you would find a sense of separation, where you found your personality but not your individuality. And so you felt separated from God. And so when Adam and Eve, as figuratively speaking, took a bite of the apple was really the apple of separation, the apple of duality. And when we started to think we are separate, we're living in that duality, which trips us up very often on occasion. And he also says the key question in our journey to being and experiencing oneness is, if this is true, that we are all one, then why is it so difficult to consciously experience this truth? It's simple to say. It's simple kind of to believe. But to experience is something different. And it's a journey that each and every one of us are on. And you're on that journey today. Maybe this is the beginning of a journey. Maybe you're a long ways along towards a journey, and you know you got further to go. My idea is as long as you're breathing, you got work to do. So just remember that, okay? And what happens is not until we are really filled with an unquenchable thirst to answer the question coming up do we begin to answer the most basic of reflective thinking questions. And that is, why am I here and who am I? You know, we all have our moments where we become derailed, where we think we're separate, where we think we're all alone, where we think life is a mess on occasion. Maybe we wonder why we are here and what is mine to do and can't be this and how can I find the real me? And so we go on a search. And most of us go on a search to the outside to find the answer. We look out there. We talk to a friend. We talk to other people. We become a group of people who think alike and act alike. And what really happens, I believe, is that's where we find a sense of separation. That's where we experience the duality. That's where we learn by receiving guidance from others rather than inner from the outer, that we begin to believe we really are separate. And we become frustrated. Maybe we become depressed. But eventually what happens, I believe, is we ultimately are addicted to something or someone. Someone being codependence. Something, not a drug necessarily. It's something we really focus on that we believe to be true that's not true. It's something we focus on that makes us feel separate from God. That's what an addiction is. And we all, from time to time, are addicted with a negative thought or a thought that's not truthful. And so what happens is that we have to go within in order to create a sense of separation that can only be healed when we surrender to the inner self for the truth of our beingness. It's only then that we are able to find answers, and they come slowly sometimes. It's then that I ask that question again: why am I here, and how can I find the real me? That is the most important question you can ask yourself, because it says you are either on the journey or you're beginning a journey into oneness. 1 + 1 is 1. That's the title of Howard's book. And you know what I have found in my journey is that I've grown. I didn't know what separation was for a long time. And I have grown in the journey that I can step back and realize in some circumstances that I am creating a perception of being separate. I am creating the idea that I am a victim, or I am right and somebody else is wrong. I am, if I'm not careful, starting to believe that I know the truth and nobody else does, okay, because they don't agree with me. And that creates that sense of separation in my mind and in my heart, which is very difficult to live with, actually. It's the reason we're uncomfortable many times, the reason we're not at peace many times. But once we step into the truth and start to look for, to experience that idea of God in me, that God and I are one, it's in that moment that we start to have some peace of mind. It's in that moment that we start, even while we are in the midst of a conflict, in the midst of a challenge, that we start to be at peace, and then we can think clearly so that we come up with the answer. And that's part of our journey, coming up with the answers that are right for each of us individually and not always collectively. Because we each have had different experiences, lived different lives, been treated different by people, and we take all that into who we are, and therefore we each have to have an individual experience with that which created us. And every once in a while I find that I have to, when I find myself in my ego or in fear, I have to leave that playground, if you would, that some call the playground of life, and I have to move into and surrender to the source of my being. I have to leave the world as I see it and come into a world that's totally different than what I am perceiving, so that I'm in my oneness, not in a sense of separation. In my life, I've had several experiences where I became one with the source of all that I could understand. In those several experiences, they have carried me along the path, if you would, I hope, in understanding myself and understanding others. And the first one happened, that I remember, when I was 19 years old. And I was in college and I was studying the Bible. And I was studying the Baptist Bible, because I was at Baptist college, okay? And they didn't know what metaphysics were. If they did, they didn't tell us. And anyway, I was outside sitting in an area around the campus under a tree, and I was reading the Bible and studying the book. And all of a sudden, something happened. And I really felt as though God was right there with me. I felt that everything around me, I felt what I call today a sense of oneness. Now, what I thought then is, boy, aren't I special? God made an exception and came down and talked to Richard. But eventually I understood what it meant, that the Christ within me was guiding me, and I was sensing that, and I didn't even know why. It was something, I can't even tell you what I was reading in the Bible. But it happened. My journey religiously has been, first of all, I was literally born and raised a Southern Baptist. More of a liberal Southern Baptist, I want to say that. But it was there. Little hell, little brimstone. I could talk about that pretty good myself. And became a licensed Baptist minister. It was a few years later that I got married. And before we got married, I made sure that my wife agreed that we would stay Baptist, or I would stay Baptist, because she was not a Baptist. She was Presbyterian. And soon after we got married and we had our first child, we became Presbyterians. Yeah? And that was okay. It was good. I didn't even get angry about it, because what happened was I found a denomination for me that didn't preach to me, but spoke to me and asked for discussion, asked for ideas and thought. That's what I found in the Presbyterian church I joined. I was in Presbyterian for about 8 or 9 years, 10 years, and then I moved to New Jersey. And I looked for a Presbyterian church, and I went, and it was August, about this time of the year, and I went to the Presbyterian church down the street. Had a big sign on the door, closed for the summer. I remember saying to my wife, I didn't know God took a vacation in summer. And I got used to that, because I really enjoyed it in summer, because I played golf instead of went to church. But anyway, they were closed. And what had happened, what they would do is, there were 5 churches in town, and they would bring in a minister from England, and he would talk to each church as total congregations, as one, each Sunday, and they moved around church to church. I just happened to catch it on the summer, on the Sunday that the church was closed. Well, it said that they were meeting next week at Congregational Church, so my wife and I went to the Congregational Church, took our children there. And we stayed there for about 10, 12 years. And it was a great experience. Again, I went from the Baptist, a little more liberal thinking in Presbyterian, a lot more liberal thinking in Congregationalist Church. It was built under the Norman Vincent Peale model. It wasn't Dutch Reform. It was actually built on that model. And the minister was really liberal. I mean, he gave a message one time and said that maybe, just maybe, there wasn't a virgin birth. Well, he nearly lost his job over that. Other than that, it was okay. And I shared with him that that wasn't right, because we had become good friends, and we had lunch together, and I said, boy, that was really, I don't know how you can believe that. And he goes, just think about it. And I go, no, I don't have to think about it. God can do anything. And I learned over time it really wasn't important, whether it was a virgin birth or not a virgin birth. That's just a belief system. And so what happened, though, is, you see, he introduced me by that statement and several others he made of a new way of thinking. And then I was what I call about 10 years in the wilderness, where the religion that I had was remembering what I believed rather than expressing what I believed. And I was kind of stumbling around. And I think that at the right and perfect time, Vicki got me to go to a Unity church. My wife has had a lot of influence on me about religion. But anyway, she got me to go to a Unity church. And it was there that I really did feel at home. Because I had moved, and my journey had taken me to a place where I was ready for what Unity was teaching. I was ready for new thought. I was ready for this idea that we are on a journey to know and to express God, that we truly are one with all that God is. When I was 20 years old, I was not like Howard Caesar. If somebody had told me or invited me to a Unity church, I would have gone home and told my parents they were all going to hell because they didn't believe in Jesus as personal Savior. You see, my truth was holding me back, was limiting me. And so I continue this journey today, learning more and more about myself. I will say that today, my idea of God compared to where it was, even when I first came into Unity, is probably 180 degrees different. I found myself standing on top of my head more often than not in unity, because some of the belief systems are totally different than anything I was ever taught. And I have to absorb those and understand, for me, and then start to question even some of them to see if they're the truth for me. And that's all part of my process. And I would say today, as I said when I was in my 20s, that if unity, which I think is a powerful way to know God, if something comes up better than unity, I'll go to that. Now, I don't have that much time left, maybe 25 years. And so, therefore, I don't expect that to happen, but it might happen. And I want to be open. And I want each of you to be open to that. I'm not running you out of here. I'm just saying being open to Spirit to guide and direct you. And I think most of you will stay here, okay? But there are many, many paths to God. And they all lead us into the oneness of what people call God, of the words for God. Jehovah is no different than the word source. Unconditional love is no different than the word Allah. There is one God, and it expresses itself in many different ways. And in unity, we really believe, and we firmly believe, that it expresses itself through us, and we are expressions of that one God. And as expressions of that one God, what happens is that we are on this journey, and in this journey, we are having these experiences, and what Howard said is that we are part of the whole of the one life. I am in God and of God as you are in God and of God. So the truth is, we are truly one. No matter one's religion, no matter the denomination, no matter the spiritual path, our common destiny is to learn to live from a consciousness of oneness with God, meaning 1 plus 1, I said equals 1, but is 1. You see, the one true God by many names lives within every person, and that includes each and every one of us. As we continue on our journey, we start to see things differently. And the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk about, today is the journey, just the journey. Next week, we're going to talk about what is God? Who is God? How does God show up? What is this expression of God? And I know every time I explore that, I get a little different idea of how God shows up in us. Created in the image of God. In the Course in Miracles, this morning we were reading it, it says that the image of God means the likeness of God. And the image of God means the thought of God. All of us have thoughts. And you know, sometimes we just get caught up in our thinking rather than our thoughts. But when you stop and have a new thought, where does that come from? Nobody really knows. So we make a name for it. It comes from the source of our creation. It comes from the Creator. It comes from God. It comes from divine mind, which creates those thoughts. And so we are born to be expressions of those thoughts. Jesus said, I and my Father are one. And he also prayed for his disciples. And he said to them, this is eternal life. So I pray that they all may be one as thou, Father, art in me and in thee. That they also may be one in us, that they may be one even as we are one. I in them and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in oneness. That the love wherewith thou hast loved me may be in them and I in them. Jesus is a way shower. Jesus didn't say, you and I are one, Father, and they're separate. He said, we're all one. And we're on that journey to oneness, and that's what he was teaching That's what he was showing. That's why he was a way shower. Paul said, Christ is all and in all. Period. Christ is all and in all. So again, for the next 3-4 weeks, we'll talk about this idea of what is God, how does God express through us, and relationships. One of the things that I have really come to understand as best I can is that it's all about relationships. That, we can work on this idea of our spiritual journey and we can come to a certain level of understanding and we can feel at peace and we can feel wonderful, and then we go, what else? Where do I go from here? Because frankly, that wears off a little bit. It's oh-hum. And where do we go from there? It is creating relationships that are meaningful, that teach us who and what we are, how we are not or are expressing God. And we're going to talk about that as a fourth and final lesson. And so I want you to join me, and what I want to ask you to do is either listen or watch or play YouTube during the week so you don't miss one of these messages, okay? Because it'll all be there. This morning we've had a little trouble with our live streaming, which worked perfectly on Wednesday. And so some gremlin got in there and messed up something, but we're going to figure that out. But if you're not live streaming and you're away, you can watch it by going to our website, opening up the live streaming, and there is a little thing that says if you want to watch this from YouTube, past messages, you click on that little blue line, and the past message will be right there. Usually within 30 minutes to 40 minutes after the service, the message is there. And so I invite you to do that. And remember, as you watch, that we are one. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a breath. I want you to think about this for 1 second. And that is, we are one. Can you say that? We are one. Now say it with conviction. We are one. And then, remember, not only are we one, but that we are manifestations of God. And we are created in image and likeness of God. And our greatest desire, is to be that image and likeness of God. So we're going to go into meditation now. And as we go into meditation,